Chapter 20, Jonathan helps David. In chapter 19, verses 1 to 7, Saul wanted to kill David. Jonathan spoke to Saul, and Saul changed his decision. David went back to serve Saul again. So when David came to Jonathan, this time Jonathan did not believe David. Jonathan trusted Saul, his father. Jonathan was sure that David would be safe with Saul. In the past, Saul had told Jonathan everything, but Saul knew that Jonathan and David were very good friends. This time, Saul did not tell Jonathan that he wanted to kill David. David and Jonathan made a plan. Numbers chapter 10 verse 10, chapter 28 verse 11 to 15 tell us about the special offerings at the chime of the new moon. Saul had a special meal for 3 nights at this time. Saul expected all his servants to go to that meal. The important people sat in the special place at the table. People would notice if David's seat was empty. David pretended that he had gone back to his family home in Bethlehem. People used to sacrifice at Shiloh, 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 3, until the Philistines destroyed the town. If Saul liked David, Saul would be happy about that. If he did not like David, Saul would be angry. Jonathan, as son of the king, had power to hurt David. But Jonathan had made a promise with David in chapter 18 verse 3 to 4. David reminded Jonathan about this promise, and he asked Jonathan to be loyal and be kind. David deserved to die if he had not been loyal to Saul. David wanted Jonathan rather than Saul to kill him. But David had been a loyal servant to Saul. Saul wanted to kill David only because he was jealous of David. May the Lord be with you as he was been with your father. Verse 13. Jonathan knew that David would be the next king. See the notes on chapter 18 verse 3 to 4. Jonathan saw that the Lord had given Saul success in the past. Jonathan wanted the Lord to give David success too. In the future, David would become a king. People would think that Saul's family was David's enemy. If a new king came from a different family, he usually killed the old king's family. In verse 14, Jonathan asked David to be kind to him when David becomes the king. When Jonathan referred to David's enemy, verse 14 and 15, he knew that this would be including his father. In verse 8 and verse 14 and verse 15, the word kind is a very strong word. It means to promise to give loyal love. It refers to the way that God promises to show his loyal love to us. David and Jonathan's love for each other was like God's love. Jonathan had to find a secret way to give David the news. Jonathan probably often practiced with his bow and arrows. He wanted to become more accurate when he fought battles. Jonathan took a boy who went to find all the arrows, but he did not want the boy to know about David. The boy would not suspect that Jonathan's message was for someone else. David had to wait near a big rock. The name Israel means to go away. Jonathan expected that David would be safe. If he was not safe, Jonathan knew that David had to leave. The Lord, not Jonathan, would send him away. Also, the Lord would help David to keep his promise to Jonathan. 2 Samuel chapter 9 and chapter 21 verse 7 describes when this happened. Verse 25 says that Saul sat by the wall. The king always sat in the most important place. Abner was the son of Saul's uncle and the leader of Saul's army. 1 Samuel chapter 14 verse 15 and chapter 17 verse 55. He was very important, so he sat next to the king. David should have gone to this special meal instead of going to visit his family. The Israelites had to be clean when they sacrificed or had a special meal. Leviticus chapter 7 verse 20 to 21. This means more than clean clothes or a clean body. Leviticus chapter 11 to 15 describes what made a person unclean. In verse 27, Saul called David the son of Jesse. He probably said this to insult David. In verse 30 to 33, Saul was very angry with Jonathan. The Hebrew word that Saul used were insulting and not polite. Saul was angry because Jonathan was David's good friend. And Saul knew that David would be the king instead of Jonathan. In chapter 15, God refused Saul as king because Saul did not obey God in his life. Therefore, Jonathan would not become a king after Saul, but Saul wanted Jonathan to be the next king of Israel. So Saul was trying to kill David. Then Saul became so angry with Jonathan that he tried to kill his own son too. Jonathan was angry about this. Jonathan realized that David was not safe near Saul, and Jonathan was sad about how his father had dealt with David. Jonathan knew that he had to get the news to David quickly. Jonathan shouted, "Hurry up, go quickly, do not stop." This message was for David, not the boy. Saul would certainly kill David if he did not leave that place. Jonathan wanted to see David, so he sent the boy away. First, David greeted Jonathan as the king's son. David gave respect and honor to him. Verse 41 describes how David did that. Then David and Jonathan greeted each other as friends. They loved each other. They were very sad that they had to separate. David was the most sad. He had to run away to save his life. In verse 42, peace includes safety. See verse 7, verse 14 and verse 21. Jonathan knew that God would keep David safe. They talked again about the promise that they had made for each other and to the Lord. The promise was for them and for their families. David and Jonathan trusted God with his promise, whatever might happen in the future. David and Jonathan met only once more before Jonathan died. Chapter 23, verse 16 to 18.